Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And they got away.
You know, that's my take. What's yours?
Protonic reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact. They were all up in your face. So it's time once again for the one, the only Protonic reversal. Welcome to it. Tonight's special episode. Episode 322. 322. Russell Simins of Service. Jon Spencer Blues Explosion. Crunt. Nasty. Actually, this is 323. I was wrong. I have 322 in the show notes, though. And I'm very excited to talk to him. He's a very multi-talented individual, great drummer, engineer, producer of a bunch of awesome bands. The Just Fred record is one that I particularly nerd out on. And yeah, very excited to have him. It's going to be a great time. So before we get to going into that, this is episode 323, not 322, of Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I am your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer that has been touring and recording for 23 years now. Most known for the band Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this very long-running show to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect. People who are very talented and good at what they do, but may not be household names. If this is your first time listening to the show, all the archives are free, protonicreversal.com. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. Otherwise, $1 a month at patreon.com/protonicreversal will get you the episodes sooner, and it also helps support the show and keep the lights on, so to speak. And if you like the show, or even just a single episode, please feel free to like, share with a friend or an enemy or frenemy. All the episodes around that helps the show grow, it helps beat the almighty algorithm, and it's just a darn nice thing to do. Subscriptions are also free on all the various services, yada, 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 and infinitum. Russell Simins. What an awesome guy this guy is. And I'm very excited to have him on the show, and I don't want to delay any longer. Let's go right to it.
Hey,
Russell, welcome, sir. How you doing, sir?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you? Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Looking sharp. And it's awesome. I totally neglected to mention that Drag Me is, I named it the best record of 2022. Definitively.
Right on. That's much appreciated. Thank you. Yeah.
Kind of took a while to get that one together, right? I mean, that was a long time in the making.
It did, yeah. I mean, we started working on that several years ago. I mean, that kind of, the birth of that was from kind of the birth of me meeting Jilly, really. Right. We were on tour. We Are Hex was on tour with Blues Explosion. We met, we fell in love. We started hanging out. I ended up coming to Indianapolis on a break from Blues Explosion, and we started at it in every way, including writing songs and making music together. And so, yeah, it took a few years to get it right, and I was very happy with how cohesive it all sounded, because you never know with that process. But when it's like this, a little here, a little there, a little this, a little that. But I pride myself on the way I produce a record too, and so I really wanted it to sound a certain way, and I think it came out sounding pretty good.
It does, because it's a big rock record, but doesn't sound just like it sounds more than just like band in a room. Now, if there's anything wrong with recordings that are just band in a room,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that stuff. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But there's a real big there's an energy to it that actually nothing can quite compare with a live show of a cracking live band. But like you get like a bigger idea of this the bombast and the bigness of it all. And you know, and as someone that, you know, most folks probably know your drumming, which is excellent, but you've done a lot of production stuff. You've done a lot of engineering, a lot of things along those lines.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
And when did you throw in with that? What was the first time you started into it?
I think that started kind of, you know, with Blues Explosion. I mean, Blues Explosion was from me being on the Honeymoon Killers.
Right.
And I met Jon through the Honeymoon Killers, and I just, you know, I've always been into music and the way everything sounds, and butthole surfers have always been an obsession of mine, and how, you know, all the great ways that sounds. And when I was with Blues Explosion on tour, actually in Japan, I met up. We were doing shows with Cibo Matto there.
Yeah. Oh God, Cibo Matto, so great. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we became fast friends. And I you know, I wanted to make a record with them, and that kind of got on, you know, got the fire under my feet, and that became like my baby with them to make a record. We started writing songs, went into the studio, and I started, you know, doing my thing, whatever I do, you know, just taking all the different kinds of synthesizer sounds that Yoko would come up with, and writing songs on guitar, which is something that I'd been doing on my own, but not in such an intense way, and on drums and on guitar, and bringing other people in. It became a kind of a super group with like Rick Lee from Skeleton Key and Mike Mills, the filmmaker, Thumbsucker. He was famous at the time as being a kind of a up and coming graphic designer, and not the Mike Mills, the bass player from REM.
No, that's REM, but you're talking the one that did like Come On, which is like my favorite movie of that year.
Exactly. And we were all, it was a little world of us in New York on the Lower East Side. And I had these ideas, and it's always been the way with me from then to now. I hear whatever I'm hearing in my head, and I want to, you know, with the songs that I'm writing and with who I'm working with, I want to put it down. And that's what became Butter-08.
Which is great. Yeah. And that's such a interesting, like I worked at a record store when that came out, and was like, oh, what's this? Like, what this is an unexpected surprise, kind of like, you know, it seemingly came out of nowhere if you weren't involved with it, but it was like, oh, what a great collection of you know, cool, talented folks that I didn't necessarily expect from as an outsider to be.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I mean, that was what it was. It did kind of come out of nowhere. I remember Tim Carr, who worked for Capitol Records, not the guy from Texas. Tim Carr was.
I'm sensing a theme here. Yeah.
He is this very cool A&R guy who worked for Capitol Records, knew the Beastie Boys, and again, all of our own little world. And I knew the Beastie Boys because they were fans of the Blues Explosion, and you know, typical to the way the Beastie Boys or Mike D does things. We just got in touch on a phone call, and we just started talking, and he asked me about the band, and then I started doing Butter-08, and he was interested, and we signed a contract on a napkin in his house. I still wish I had that napkin, but
napkin, yeah.
I mean, that's the way it was. It was he was a fan. He was a fan of both the bands. He loved the way it was sounding, and it did kind of come out of nowhere. I remember Tim Carr. The reason why I bring him up is he was from Capitol Records. He's like, I didn't even know about this record, and all of a sudden it's on Grand Royal, and that's kind of the way it happened. And then from Butter-08, you know, we did all that, and then Blues Explosion is making records, and I'm always in the studio with Blues Explosion, and I'm, you know, sort of learning from that, and, you know, kind of incorporating whatever, you know, ideas or things or what, whatever I wanted to do as far as that goes, I was doing that in the studio with those guys. Jon was very savvy and Judah kind of didn't really care.
Judah's just there to play guitar, exactly.
Yeah. Perfect. That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Jon and I were both studio heads, becoming more so him a little bit ahead of me. And I learned a lot from being around him, and I had my own way of doing things and my own things that I was wanting to do. And then I made another Grapevine record, and that was kind of the same thing. It wasn't Butter or Wait, because that band kind of, for a variety of reasons, various people didn't have time for it. And we made a very cool video with Evan Bernard for Butter 69. And Weird Al told me it was one of his favorite videos of the year.
Awesome.
Just weird shit like that. And
is that the Public Places record you're talking about?
No, that the Public Places record came after Butter 08.
Okay.
Butter 69 was the song that was on the Butter 08 record that Al heard. And I met Al for a variety of reasons, which we can go into. But he said it was his favorite video of the year for the song Butter 69 on the Butter 08 record.
That guy knows from videos too. I mean, that guy's, he knows from videos.
I know videos. Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I love Weird Al. I have a great fondness for the guy and who he is and what he does and his humility. And he's everything you think he's going to be when you meet him. He's just a regular guy. He's a little crazy, in his own kind of crazy way. He's not crazy like Gibby Haynes crazy. With all love and respect, I know Gibby. I say that with all the love and fondness for crazy. Sure. But he's crazy and kind of like a Weird Al crazy. He's very cool. I remember when we were in the middle of doing Orange, we met up with Beck for some reason. Beck is on Orange.
He's on. That's a great kind of like surprise collab. And at the time, it's kind of hard to describe because people just didn't have the awareness of things they did now until they threw the record on. It was like the Avengers meeting the X-Men or something. It was like, whoa, it's crazy. It's like
a phone call. That was basically a phone call. We called it back, and Jon asked him if he wanted to be on a song, and Beck said yeah, and Jon was like, when do you want to do it? He goes, let's just do it over the phone.
Yeah.
So that is over a phone call.
It's great. And it's like it's such a bizarre kind of just it jumps in kind of thing anyway, that it's kind of astounding that like it works really well, because it's like kind of a lo-fi. There's that like the old telephone style distortion.
Yeah.
In some frequencies and stuff. It's awesome as just a surprise thing. It's like, whoa, that's great. Where did that come from? Is that
all the things that people spend hours
trying to make,
and there it is.
Find the crappiest telephone you can find.
Yeah. I mean, just a conversation. I remember hearing Uncle Albert Halsey when I was a kid, and I've never forgotten about that telephone sound on that record. Anyway, Beck, we were hanging out with Beck, and we were doing something with him during that time. And he had told me that, just back to the Weird Al, that Weird Al was wanting to do, one of his covers of Loser. And Beck was asking us, like, what does he think? Like, do we think we should do it? And I was like, I mean, I love Weird Al, sure. But I think Beck just didn't want to get kind of pigeonholed with that.
Yeah.
This great song is now like, I think Weird Al's idea for it was either like Boozer or I'm a Boozer Baby or something like that.
Or something Weird Al. Yeah.
But, not everybody says yes to it. I mean, kudos to Nirvana for saying yes. He does ask permission. He is a super professional dude.
Did you see that? Well, I guess you can't quite call it a documentary, kind of Nazi biopic. I mean, that movie.
I've seen clips from it. I've kind of willfully kind of avoided it, but I do want to see it because I saw Al talk about it. I'm interested in anything that Al does, and I want to see anything that he's in. But because of what it is, I just kind of like haven't really been that interested. But he seems to love it, so I'm going to want to see it.
I will say this: it is absolutely makes sense for being who he is. It's precisely the kind of film it needed to be.
Good.
And which is to say that it's not a traditional biopic in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And it's deeply hilarious and actually makes fun of the film.
That's enough of a review to make me want to see it. I mean, like I said, even the fact that he promotes it and he loves it.
Yep.
And I can tell that he genuinely does. So it makes me want to see it. You know,
it's interesting though when you bring up Weird Al, because and this has come up on the show previously. For me, one of my first kind of forays into punk rock was the Dr. Demento show.
Oh, his hero.
Yeah, and like that's how I ended up. And
that's great.
It's crazy to think about now when there's all these different avenues into like weird music and whatnot for the younger folks. But like it was like, oh yeah, if you wanted to hear something kind of like weird or crazy, if you want to hear like Shaving Cream or like Come to Take Me Away, haha, like that's he was the guy that did it, and that kind of gatewayed into other bands. And
I mean, for him too, he talks about Dr. Demento is opening his eyes to everything.
Yeah.
And that makes sense with you. I mean, you know, I understand knowing you the little bit I do. I mean, I know you well enough to know that you're into cool, crazy shit. That makes sense that you would have responded to that.
Yeah, it tracks. Yeah. But tell me, Russell, like, so I love Orange. I think Orange is amazing record. I want to get back talking about it. I actually don't really know the Blues Explosion origin story though. Obviously I know you guys' other bands, you know, I love Pussy Galore is great, you know, Honeymoon Killers, and I do want to talk a little bit about Crunt as well, because I've had Stu on the show, but just tell me first before any of that,
sure,
how did Blues Explosion actually come together?
Well, you know, believe it or not, I was a projectionist, like a 35 millimeter projectionist in like an art house in New York. And I would be in there and I was like, you know, writing my things down, my ideas for songs and this and that. And I was kind of getting fed up with like, you know, I've been a drummer since I was 6 or 7 years old. And I put that down. I wanted to learn guitar. I met Judah actually. He moved to New York from Wisconsin. He was like 17, and he was this live wire. We had mutual friends. I met him very fortuitously because he and I just like gangbusters, like became like instant brothers. Yeah. Like everything, like, you know, he was the only one who knew like why, you know, King of the Delta Blues is the most important record, you know, and like, you know, just everything, knew all the punk rock. 17 years old, he had a lot of experience under his belt. Moved to New York. I was kind of his guide, and he was kind of my guide. We were kind of each other's spirit guide, and you know, and we both loved listening to Pussy Galore and Sonic Youth, and loved all that stuff. And he was a big Pussy Galore fan. So we used to talk about Jon Spencer all the time, and we kind of knew that. I mean, I was living in the Lower East Side, true Lower East Side New Yorker, moved there, you know, right out of high school, went to school in New York at NYU. But really my school was New York City in the Lower East Side. Wasn't a very good student, but, you know, anyway, you know, was living in the world of the Ramones, and I was working as a projectionist, and I knew Judah, and we started playing music together, and we went to see Boss Hogg at Pyramid Club, the famous Pyramid Club. You know, Judah was saying, you know, Boss Hogg, Jon Spencer, I'll go check it out. I didn't know anything about Boss Hogg. I knew that they were a band that John was in, and I knew Sonic Youth. I loved Sonic Youth. We're talking like 1990 now, 89.
Yeah, right. Around that time period. Yeah.
Hanging out in front of CBGB's every weekend, listening to Head of David, and, you know, all this great, you know, seeing the Goat come in and out the door, you know, hearing them from the outside. You early lubricated goat probably, but Unsane. Anyway, I went and saw Boss Hog. I saw Charlie Andres playing drums for them from the Unsane,
Yeah.
He also played drums with them. And I was known as a kid. I was known as being a great drummer all through high school. I played drums. I was the first person to play drums on a kit in my high school because I refused to just play like marching band drums. And they gave me a kit and everyone was like very, impressed with my drumming skills. I put it down though. I saw Charlie Andres. I fell in love with his style. And I said to myself, I can do that. And I might even be able to do it better than him. That's what I said to myself. I was fucking, in my early 20s. What did I know? I was
anything's possible.
yeah, exactly. Have I proven that correct? I don't know. But in any case, I saw that show, and that show inspired me to stop being a projectionist, stop sitting around just doing whatever band I was doing with Judah. And I opened up the Village Voice, and it said Primal Drums Wanted. And I thought, okay, Primal Drums sounds good to me. It was the Honeymoon Killers. It was the Honeymoon Killers. I went to visit the Honeymoon Killers. I didn't know who they were. But
Yeah.
I knew that they knew John because they were talking about it, and Judah kind of told me about it. I played drums for them. They were instantly like very impressed with my playing. John had been jamming with them because he had just split from Pussy Galore. So he was only doing Boss Hog. It was not a very happy dude, according to him, because
Pussy Galore, he's basically being the sideman to Christina. And
well, that's not why. I mean, you can interpret that way, but I think it was also just because Pussy Galore was his like baby, and it was done.
Yeah, and he was kind of trying to figure out what was next. And
yeah, he was looking for something new, and they told him, we have this great new drummer. You should come by to one of, because he was playing with them anyway. He was kind of helping them out with their records, and he came by to the practice space. This kind of in New York, it's kind of famously known. It's called Funhouse. It's a practice space where people have recorded many of the bands that probably recorded their records there. It's Jerry Teal's practice space that he had with Lisa.
Sure.
From the Honeymoon Killers. And John came by. We jammed together. His eyes lit up. Like we both just were totally on to each other, just vibing. And he's an intense guy. I'm an intense guy. No bones about it. We were just like, wow, man. He was like, you are a great. He just started. He goes, you are a great drummer. I was like, man, I love everything that you do. And then like that night we went out. We all got drunk. We went to some club. He's like introducing me to like Jim Thurwell and a bunch of other people that we knew. Like it was just kind of funny and sweet in a sweet way, and I kind of drunkenly like introduced. This new drummer he's the greatest drummer I've ever heard. It's just shit like that. It was just funny. And John and I became fast friends that way. And that was kind of, it was just like we would go to Honeymoon Killer practice and play together. He was kind of temporarily in their band. I was in their band. And then he would ask me to stay after practice to jam. And then he asked me if I knew any guitar players. And I said, well, Judah would like,
yeah.
Judah's, the extent to which Judah was a guitar player at that point was, we had a big loft in Brooklyn. We had a studio that we had built there. He would go into a dark room, turn on my Ornette Coleman records, and just play along to them.
Yeah, it's so from an outsider perspective. Again, Judah's always struck me as just a guy that looks like he just lives and breathes the instrument. And there's
but at that point, he didn't really know how to play, but he self-taught himself how to play in a very maybe unorthodox. Maybe it's the way a lot of people do. Maybe it's the way Paul Leary learned how to play, but he was sounding like Paul Leary without knowing not exactly like Paul Leary, but the effect, without really knowing what he was doing, but playing along to all my free jazz records. I had a huge record collection like I do now. Yeah. It's a lot bigger now, but he'd sit in a dark room and just play away. It got to the point where, like, when Jon said, "Do you know any guitar players?" I was like, "Well, I kind of know Judah's a really good friend of mine. He kind of plays guitar." So
he has a guitar.
He has a guitar. And Jon and I were pretty punk rock. He's like, I mean, I don't think Jon would have cared. I think both of us are into people who are into the people first. And I mean, you got to have certain kind of skills, amount of skills. But Judah was a real character. And he came by one of the Honeymoon Killers practices to like pick up his guitar or borrow a guitar from Jerry. And afterwards, Jon said, "Is that Judah?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, ask him if he wants to jam with us."
Yeah.
So then post Honeymoon Killer practices were, because I asked Judah, and Judah's like, "Of course, sure." Or as Judah would say at that time, "I don't care. Sure."
Yeah, exactly. Totally ambivalent. Yeah.
Okay. I don't care. Sure. And then we just started jamming, and those jams kind of led me away from Honeymoon Killers and more into what I was doing with Jon and Judah, because it was really more what I wanted. We were creating music. I wasn't playing Honeymoon Killers songs. I was playing new songs because we all wrote all the songs together for the most part.
Yeah.
The Blues Explosion. So we were like writing songs together at Funhouse Practice Space. That's what turned into that first record, that first crazy,
the style and
free jazz punk rock, that Crip style was called Crip style by Tim Warren of Crip Records, and what also came out on Caroline as our first record. And then there was also this bootleg Reverse Willie Horton. I don't know if you know that record.
Yeah, that's the one that's got Clarence Thomas. On the cover, right? Remember, right?
It's
and there's like breasts on the back or something, if I remember.
I say bootleg in quotes,
Right? Yeah.
That's all you really need to know about that. But that was actually our first official release.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool, first record's a bootleg. And that other record, the Crip style record, we let Tim Warren, who's like a hero of ours, who anyone doesn't know, he runs Crypt Records, which is like, Tim Warren is like the Hunter S. Thompson of punk rock, man. I mean, he looks like him, he talks like him, he acts like him. He's a true one-of-a-kind genius, and he is Crypt Records, and he had the Crypt Records store in Hamburg.
Yeah, he did like Oblivions and Bantam Rooster. And
yeah. A lot of bands like that, like
Teen Generate.
What?
Teen Generate, I think you put in some Teen Generate stuff. Right?
Yeah. And
New Bomb Turks.
New Bomb Turks. One of my favorite. Destroy a Boy. That's a Crypt record. That's one of my favorite. That's one of Jilly's favorite records too. The back of that record where they're that live shot. Anyway, so Tim was like a hero of ours. Crypt was our label in Europe at the time, and we said that take our first record and sequence it the way you want, and that's what Crypt Records became.
Nice. So and that's those first sessions.
Style, I'm sorry, that's what Crypt style became.
Kramer, first session was Kramer, right? Recorded the
that Caroline release. That's Kramer, yeah.
And then you recorded with Steve next, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we recorded with Steve a few times. We recorded with Steve for Extra Width, and also then for Steve for that first record too, for some tracks that became different tracks. Like there were a bunch of different versions of that first record. Some of them were with Steve, some of them with Kramer. And then that was it. That was the one time I worked with Steve at this great studio in New Jersey called I think it was called Water Studios in Jersey, and it had like one of the original. It was famous for having like I believe a Sly-Stone console there.
Right.
No, sorry. It was something having to do with Lenny Kravitz. Anyway, not as interesting as the Slice console. That's the key. That's the Key Club. the Kippinger console.
Stone console will give you a contact high, I'm sure. But anyway,
yeah. Anyway, so that was how we got together with Steve, and of course, John and Steve were old friends from Big Black and Pussy Galore, and we met Steve, and we all became fast friends and loved working with Steve, and you know.
So how soon is it before you start playing as a live band, and then you go out with the Jesus Lizard, right? Which are both intense bands,
yeah,
but different sounding. Like it's not the same, but like there's the level of showmanship and craftsmanship are both there, but like in totally different ways.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus Lizard happened because we shared the same booking agent, but we're also fans of the band. And that was another love fest. It was like we would play, and David Yao would run over to me after we played, and he'd say, "You're the greatest fan I've ever seen." You know, the way David Yao does.
Yeah.
And I would watch them, and Mac McNeely was like my new, fucking, it's mentoring me basically. I was watching him, he was watching me. I mean, I still think Mac is the greatest living drummer. Just.
He's up there for sure.
Unbelievable that I know. To be fair to all the ones that are probably better than he is, that I know and have seen, Mac McNeely, no one's ever blown my mind like Mac McNeely. And he felt the same about us, and he was watching me every night, and I was watching him every night. And that was just, we were all hitting them. We had the Motel 6 guy. We were all touring together in vans, hitting every Motel 6, staying at the same Motel 6s. I would go in the Jesus Lizard van while David was driving, and David would say stuff like, normally when I'm here up alone, they're all sleeping in the back. The only difference between now and then is usually I'm jerking off.
Oh, David.
I'm sure he doesn't mind that I'm telling that story. If he even remembers.
He's been on this show a couple times. I'm pretty sure he told worse stories than that.
Exactly. But yeah, we would all pull pranks on our booking agent. At night, we'd call up and say somebody's had a terrible accident, or, we just had a good time. And those guys would smoke a lot of pot, and we would drink, and, and that was it. It just I could not have imagined a better way to cut my teeth than to be on tour constantly in America with the Jesus Lizard in the early 90s.
Right, exactly. Not a bad time to be out with them. So then talk to me about the band, because I feel like I like the early stuff. The early stuff's great in all its iterations. I think I've got 3 versions of the first record, but like the jump up to what you guys were doing with Orange, like it's almost like it's so poetic that the record starts like how it is, because it hits so different. Yeah,
it's got that weird. What's that song called? What's that song? Bell something? Yeah.
Bell Bottoms. Yeah.
I'm joking.
Yeah. It says like 17 times. That's the joke.
But that song is that's.
It's got the strings and stuff, and you're like, "What? Did I put the right?"
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I'm joking about that song is because it has that song's, especially in the last several years, it's had a life of its own with Baby Driver.
And it's in like one of the most important scenes of that movie.
Yeah,
I saw that. I was like, "Holy crap! It's the Blues Explosion."
Yeah, that was pretty exciting. Also, more exciting. I mean, the scene's great, and the way, of course, Edgar is brilliant with it. But it's also. That song, basically, according to Edgar in his interviews, that song is what inspired that movie. According to him, if you read his interviews,
that's awesome.
Which is, kind of makes sense when you see the movie. But I'm very humbled by how he used that song, and and all that he did for us in that song, doing as much as it did for us, because it's in that great movie. Yeah, so the thing about Orange and Extra Width is that, okay, so we were all very, very driven and inspired by all the great punk rock, but we were also very much big fans of Stax and the Meters, and very much James Brown. I brought this Meterman CD that was actually, I think it was a CD that I made into a cassette because we didn't have a CD player in the van. I had my friend make a cassette of this Meters collection. I have that CD still because it means so much to me. And we were listening to the Meters 24/7. We were listening to James Brown, worshiping everything that James Brown was 24/7. Stax Volt singles 24/7. It's all stuff that I liked that stuff when I was a kid. I was always a High Records fan because I was a big fan of Al Green. Al Green is one of the, along with Karen Carpenter and Ringo Starr, is one of the people that made me like really, when I heard Al Green sing for the first time on like some late night, maybe Don Kirshner's Rock Country, whatever it is, I was like, that is moving. Music moves me, you know. And anyway, so I was all into that Memphis High stuff and Stax, and John was really getting into it then too. And we all were just together, you know, it is in a band. I mean, you listen to the same stuff, you kind of all inspired by it.
Yeah.
We started going more kind of like punk rock meets, you know, soul and funk and James Brown.
The James Brown thing is I'm glad you bring it up because that's a thing that one of the first times I described what the Blues Explosion was, because again, back when you had to describe music to people rather than just everybody already knowing, when I worked at a record store, I was like, yeah, it's kind of like noisy punk rock James Brown in a way, because it's really tight and concise and like it moves, but it's like not, you know, there's some roll to it. Like it's
a good description, and we pride ourselves on we never had a set list ever. From day one.
Yeah, it all just kind of went, and you would have you know, the Fugazi thing, right, where you go like right into like one thing. In the
yeah.
I mean,
and there were signals, whether it be John saying something or a beat that I would play or a move. You know, we were very proud. I mean, we very much pride ourselves on emulating James Brown. I mean, that to even think that we could come close to it is crazy, but you know, and Orange is named after James Brown because there's like you know, they had an orange set. There's like a bunch of live videos of them.
Yeah. Wow, I never knew that. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So that's where that came from. We were watching those videos like day and night. So it was like, you know, ingrained, and orange became a color that made sense to us because of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, John came up with that idea and that name, and we thought it was great. And then there's the song Orange. And I think if you listen to the lyrics of Orange, I think it's about those videos. You know, it's kind of about the dynamics of what happens in those videos. Extra Width was kind of like the baby of Orange. It was kind of like, it was the more unrealized version.
Yeah.
It still had those funky beats and a little bit of a funky. That is a direct song. The instrumental on that record. I'm not remembering it now.
On Extra Width, you're talking about?
Yeah, on Extra. We play it every night. It's me just playing a beat that Ziggy Mortaliste is one of my favorite drummers.
Yeah.
And the song on Extra Width, that is like a Meters kind of rip off, but that I made my own, is whatever. I'll remember the name of it in a minute, but it's one that we would play every night. It's when we do like instrumental songs a lot. But anyway, so that's kind of how that progression happened. You can hear the punk rock, but you can still hear those influences really taking hold.
And then you got flavor in there, as we adequately covered earlier, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. Avengers meets X-Men, as I characterize it. You know, it's a good it's a good vibe record too, because it kind of has different peaks and valleys and moods and stuff. It isn't just one thing the whole time. It isn't just like a sonic assault necessarily.
Yeah. Actually, the song that I'm thinking of actually is on. I'm not remembering correctly. It's on Orange. It's called Very Rare. And
Yeah.
And that song is called Very Rare because it's funny. You like to talk about songs and
I love that. Yeah, I do.
The history of song titles and song lyrics and all that. I know because I listen to your podcast religiously because it's a great podcast. Anyway, Very Rare is called Very Rare because the guy who made that I alluded to before made that cassette of that CD. He made this cassette and he gave it to us, and he's like, kept saying, "This cassette, don't lose it. It's very, very rare. It's very rare." And often John would he said something enough times. John was very good at incorporating that either into a song title or you'll hear it in a lyric. So World of Sex with that we would see World of Sex when we go to Ham all the time. When you're on the Reeperbahn, there's all those clubs called World of Sex. So Tim Lauren would talk about it and talk about it. All of a sudden it's the name of a song,
Right, yeah. It's been discussed enough. Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's also that's one of the rare. Oh, really? Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can do something about that. I don't know what's happening. So it's also one of the only songs on there that isn't one word too. There's they're all very succinct. These the songs, the song titles.
Very rare, you mean?
Yeah, Very Rare is actually 2 words, and most everything is it's bell bottoms. Brenda,
I never thought about that, but that's true.
It was a succinct time, as they say.
Yeah.
Were you and doing Orange and the things that you did, the studio embellishments, things like the orchestra and stuff like that, finding the balance between what you guys did live and then also using it as a studio? Was that kind of sparking your imagination about okay, cool, you can do these kinds of things, and this sounds neat, this is a Stax trick, this is a Beatles thing, whatever. Did that open up your world a little bit, having access to these studios and stuff like that? And
well, yeah. Being in those studios is I was like a kid in a candy store. I was inspired by it all. I watched John. John is the same kind of person. He hears things in his head, and that's what he wants to make it sound like. And I mean, I feel the same way about when I'm making music, and we're both very passionate about that. And since I've been with the Blues Explosion, if I'm not making a record with the Blues Explosion, I'm making a record with somebody else or on my own, because it's all I really love doing. And yeah, those days in the studio, seeing string players come in, and John doesn't know how to read music, so we tell him what he wanted it to sound like, and these guys would play the parts, and they're pretty simple, but they're also very cool, and so yeah, James Chance would come in the studio James, for the same thing when he came in the studio for, I think it was Acme. He's on Acme.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
We tell him, or John would tell him what he was thinking, and he'd play it, and it would be great. Yeah, that's it. That's great. So yeah, I mean, that was done in Waterworks, which is Jim Waters. Which was a studio in the old meatpacking district of New York. You always smell the bagels because underneath was a bagel factory.
Nice.
We loved that studio, and he's cutting tape, back in those days, and that's where I started. Also, I started being asked by Grand Royal bands like Luscious Jackson to do remixes for them because they liked the way the Butter 08 record sounded. So I actually did a remix for that song Naked Eye in that studio, cutting tape adding all kinds of weird stuff to it, all kinds of weird elements, synth sounds, Judah playing harmonica, on a kind of stuff that was unexpected was on those remixes, and they love the remixes, and I love doing that stuff. And I did remixes for Stereolab, and just for Duran, it just one thing led to another with me working in the studio and working with engineers and as a producer and doing remixes while I'm also making these records of my own. Just 24/7 in New York doing that stuff.
Is Crunt pretty much kind of done at the point that Orange comes out? It's kind of on the
yeah. I mean, Crunt I was in Seattle for a couple of years. At the very beginning of Blues Explosion, it wasn't a problem because I just go back to New York. I was also had a place in New York at the same time, but I mean, Crunt happened in Seattle because I was there. Judah and I were both there, and I met Stu and Kat, and we made that record because we loved hanging out and playing music together. Thought of making a band together. Went into a studio. That was another way in which I was kind of like cutting my teeth in the studio. Was Stu's a very clever guy and funny guy, and we got off on each other's creativity, and he just doesn't give a shit. I love that about him. He's also a wicked guitar player. I love playing with guitar players that are great because I feel like they're like my older brother who knows how to do something that I love more than drums. Like I know I'm known for my drumming and I have a reputation, but man, I'm all about guitar sounds and guitar records. And so when I'm like, Stu's a great guitarist, I'm just like, I'm in heaven when I'm playing with Stu or with John or Judah or any of the great guitar players I play with, anyway.
That's an underrated record, that Crunt record. I mean, we talked about it a bit when Stu was on as well. It kind of, I feel like it sort of fell into a void a little bit. So I was very excited to see it kind of get a re-airing, a re-release.
It was reissued by Improved Sequence over in it. They're a label based in Italy. They're not Italians, but they know what they're doing. They have, as usual, on their label. They have some good records and reissues. I mean, that record was kind of dead in the water for me for years. I love that Trance put it out. We had a good relationship with King Coffee, and I was just busy with tons of other stuff. And Kat and Stu broke up, and that band just had its natural demise.
I mean, some bands can survive that, and some bands can't, and especially with the side bands,
I mean, that was truly a side project, and the fact that I hear about it now more than I ever have from people like you and Mr. Flies and a whole bunch of other people who like that record, and now I'm kind of paying attention to it again, and it's been reissued, and we even talk about doing some shows,
Oh, no kid. Really? Okay.
A very surprised guest on bass. I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's me. No, I'm kidding. You guys were on, so around that time, 94, you were on, I remember you being on that Jon Stewart show. Not the Daily Show, but the Jon Stewart show.
That's right.
Completely different. And he was very good about putting musical artists on that were on the edge of your side. I remember like you guys, like Girls Against Boys, all kinds of great bands.
Matt Sweeney?
Yeah. He should come on the show.
Ask him. I mean, he's a good old friend of mine. We've known each other forever. We were also back in the Lower East Side days because Chavez was also on Matador. We were label mates.
I love Chavez. There have been 5 separate people like, oh yeah, I'll hook you up with Sweeney, and none of them have done it. And I'm not going to call them out because that would be rude, but I think it's just hilarious.
No.
Eventually it'll happen.
I mean, I'll send him a text or whatever. I haven't spoken to him in a while. Maybe I'm number 6 of those people who you'll never hear from.
Maybe he's just hard to get hold of. Maybe he went off grid. I don't know.
I mean, I haven't spoken to him in a while. We're old friends. We have nothing, everything's fine with us.
Yeah.
It's just why I mention him is because he was kind of a fixture of the scene in those days.
Sure.
And one thing that he was known for was like, if Matt Sweeney will be at the front of a show, like rocking, like into the show. And I remember him being at the Jon Stewart airing, sitting in the front seat of that audience, rocking back and forth on the seat, like loving what he was hearing and seeing. It was just a memorable moment. He's a really beautiful guy.
Did you when Services went to New York, did you go to his Superiority Burger? Did you go to that? He's a partner in that.
No. Is that a meat place?
No. That's the whole thing. It's amazing. It's a non.
Oh yeah. Yes, I've heard about it. We did not go there. That's right. Yes.
One time we played New York, and it just whatever. We happened to have a little time, and we took a stop to it, and I was like, all right, yeah, cool, check it out. And because I'm not a vegetarian, but like
the greatest vegan burgers ever, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but like good food is good food. I was like, God, that was really good. Just good food. That's amazing. I was impressed.
Yeah.
And
I've heard about it.
And I was like, oh, Sweeney's involved? Like, what is that guy not involved with? It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, he's, he gets around. He's a good guy. He's a likable dude. Good guitar player, original guitar player. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Him and Tarver is freaking like Silicon Valley and stuff. Like, what the hell, dude? Like.
Yeah.
You need an amazing shredder and guitars and good enough. You have to make one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Thanks a lot. Anyway.
Yeah. Clay's an interesting dude too. All these people are from where we all hang out at the famous Max Fish. We all hang out there all the time, every weekend. If you know about Max Fish, it's kind of eponymous crowd and bar of the Lower East Side, iconic as well,
Russell, can you tell me about that experimental remixes EP? That's the one that's got like the Dub Narcotic one, the first Dub Narcotic collab, and this guy like jizzes on there and stuff. Like that's I feel like that was a kind of a crazy. There was like that and like Judgment Night, and that was about it as far as like where it gets so first. And that's
so that's how I met. I think that's how I met Mike Mills, because he did the cover of that. He did the artwork for that.
Awesome.
Which is very cool artwork. But that's another example of us doing. I mean, it happened to be at a time when that stuff was. Actually, it was kind of fortuitous that we did that at the time, because it was at a time when that stuff was very, very trendy, like those remix records. If people don't remember, those were like
it's a big thing. It was a really big thing in the 90s. It was crazy.
Right around that time. So, we got, that's how that flavor, that remix Mike D, the flavor video is based on that remix version with Mike D, and a lot of it's kind of even it was inspired by the Beastie Boys did a remix of it. The video is actually from the song, on the record, but we kind of asked those guys to do something, and the funniest part of that is the Jizza did they did one of the remixes, because we asked Wu-Tang, the Beastie Boys, very cool people, and we got back the acapella of Jizza's lyrics.
Awesome.
For that remix, and it was hilarious to hear just by themselves with no music. I wish I remembered what some of those lines were, but I mean that came about because from what I remember of that, it was something that we thought would be a cool idea to on top, piggybacking Orange. So we did it, and it worked out very well.
I agree. I think that's and again, it's it seems weird because nobody does it now, but it was such a thing in the 90s, and it was definitely one of the more notable ones that was not just an extravagance,
Yeah. It didn't get written off as like, oh no, just another remix record. It kind of experimental remixes had a kind of a life of its own. It was very well received. It was, it's probably why Dan the Automator, how we probably ended up getting in touch with Dan the Automator for Acme, because he probably heard that and loved it,
Yeah. Well, it was a very effective crossing over of similar musical ethoses, if not explicitly musical sounds. And
well put. And it garnered a certain amount of respect because of it. Aside from the fact we were on tour with the Beastie Boys, and even though we got quarters thrown at us every night most of the time, the crowds did not like the Blues Explosion opening up for the Beastie Boys, except for like the loyal Blues Explosion fans in like the front row.
Just parked it up front, posting up.
Yeah. Arena, who were like Blues Explosion fans and maybe also Beastie Boys fans, but most of the time they were just waiting for the Beastie Boys. But that also upped our profile for sure. It was
big time.
It was a good time, and I developed some really great friendships with them because of that tour, and got to see HR, get almost basically like kicked off a tour for whatever. You can imagine the crazy stories around HR, but
I certainly
Bad Brains, with Bad Brains opening up for the Beastie Boys. So at Adam Yauch's, Adam Yauch was a huge fan and made that happen. But
so what comes first? Is it the Ass Pocket of Whiskey record, or Now I Got Worry? I think I'm trying to remember. I worked at a record store when those came out. I'm trying to remember which came first, and I can't. It's been too long.
Okay, so we were listening to RL when we were in Australia. We became huge fans of RL. Yeah. I'm not really sure which came first at this point.
They're kind of just like almost like siblings, really. I mean, they sort of like seem like they came out of the womb together to a certain degree.
Yeah, one it was like we were doing Now I Got Worry, and we were doing Ass Pocket of Whiskey is now a record that required a tremendous amount of like studio time. We went in and we recorded onto ADAT down in Oxford, Mississippi on a snowy day. With Matthew Johnson sitting there with RL, and this is before Possum was, as known and famous as they are now. And we also were kind of spearheading that kind of, hill country blues revival. We were involved. We were kind of a part of that. Bringing. I mean, RL has a whole career all his own. Doesn't need us for people to know how brilliant he is, but. Our involvement with Fat Possum and putting out Ass Pocket of Whiskey was one of those records that kind of spearheaded that whole like Fat Possum generated interest in that hill country music. Of course, there was a lot of stuff before that, too, Junior Kimbrough and all the stuff that he was doing. All those brilliant artists that did not need us for them to be known around the world. But it helped in terms of, I think, Ass Pocket of Whiskey had a certain popularity, and it gave, I think it upped the profile for Fat Possum a little bit. I mean, there was a snowstorm in Oxford, Mississippi when it snowed like a half inch to 1 inch. The whole city shut down, so we were like stuck in Mississippi, and we literally like spent like 8 to 10 hours in a house with ADATs rolling. And then Judah went with Matthew and edited the whole thing down. Much credit to Jena, and that's what became Ass Pocket of Whiskey.
Cool record. Cool. And by the way, Russ, we had a foot of snow last night up here, so that's hilarious.
Oh my God.
But also, I'm from Oakland, where if there's a quarter inch of snow, the whole city would shut down. So
yeah.
I mean, like real, like the now I Got Worry record is well, we'll talk about it in a minute. But an Ass Pocket of Whiskey, like it definitely has the feel of just like it being very breezy. Almost of like how it came together, like everything's very like, which isn't to say that it's like shambolic or anything, just like it's very like right there. It's like, oh my God, what's happening right now? Quick, hit record.
That's the way it was made. Like you're hearing the way it was made.
Yeah.
True to the way it was made. So I mean, they both came out in 96. So they are kind of like, that's why you asked me like which came first. Like I know that we were doing them both. We were in Memphis recording Now I Got Worry at the Easley Studios, famous Easley Studios.
Oh yeah. Memphis.
That was another thing that guided us, was Memphis, and our obsession with everything Memphis, Big Star, Ardent, the Easleys, just to begin with the Easleys, and Taff Falco and Panther Burns, and again Stax. I mean, it led to Memphis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love the Now I Got Worry record. So first of all, I still worked the record store when that came out, and here's one of many reasons why I got a lot of play at the record store I worked out, because it starts off with screaming.
Yeah.
And I really like that, because I would get into these musical wars with the people I was working with, our tastes weren't necessarily always aligned. I didn't work at the cool record store. I didn't work at Amoeba. I worked at Tower Records. I worked at the fourth best music store out of 4 in Berkeley. And so the fact that I could get away with something on Playstock that started off with just shouting, I was like, yes. And it also happened that the record was really great, but like that record got an unholy amount of play because I just in my mood at the time.
I mean, you and we agree. We agree with you on the beginning of it being cool that it's a scream. I don't think Matador agreed with that.
Not exactly hit record 101. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the Blues Explosion made Orange, and that had, that was like, I guess that was the way things were supposed to evolve. Like, we're a crazy punk rock band. We make crazy jam songs on our first few records, and then we kind of hone it in on Extra Width, and Orange had a little bit of more cohesiveness. And I think that Matador, again, I love Gerard and Chris Lombardi, 2 of my favorite people in the world, one of the greatest labels ever. I think they were thinking of a record that was a little bit not like Now I Got Worry. And as I've heard people say, when Acme came out, some people I would hear people say, I don't care one way or another. That was the record we wanted to make, Now I Got Worry. But I remember hearing people say, this is the record that should have followed Orange, Acme.
They think that one should be the one after. And I get that for sure. Because Now I Got Worry is a rude record. I mean, it's right there. Yeah. Honestly, I think Two Kinds of Love is one of my favorite songs that you guys ever did. Like
yours and Terry Richardson, man. Yeah, I mean,
I love it.
The thing. I mean, it's a great song. That again, actually, that was that video was made by Mike Mills.
Was it really?
Mike Mills comes up again. Yeah, he did the Two Kinds of Love video. It's kind of a weird, dreamy looking.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Yeah. That's funny.
Cool video, but Now I Got Worry. I think it was kind of our reaction to like the cleaner, not cleaner, but the sort of the more cohesive nature of Orange made us want to just kind of like explode like crazy kids. And Now I Got Worry, when we went to Eastleigh, there was a lot of crazy stuff on that record. That cover of Dub Narcotic, which we were
that's right.
obsessed with that song. John and I heard that song in Germany on tour didn't know what it was, found out what it was, then realized it was Calvin Johnson.
Yeah.
And we became so obsessed with that song, we covered it. And
Yeah, it's a good cover.
yeah, you know, it's a perfect Now I Got Worry song. It's just like
It's perfectly, yeah.
completely messy and kind of beautifully messy. But yeah. It's good to hear that you talk about that scream, because my only remembrance of people talking about that scream is the reaction that Matto had to it. The fact you were in some record store loving the fact that you could listen to a record that had a scream.
Obsessively playing it and with peace and love in my heart. Like, but yeah, I loved that. It was just like, it was almost like a dare, like, all right, motherfuckers, get ready. Here it comes. It was like,
kind of, yeah. That's great.
The video for Whale also, Weird Al did that, right?
He did, yes.
How rad was that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, Weird Al, I wanted that to happen, and you know, I think John Judah looked at me like, what? And then they realized that he's cool. I mean, I think they knew he was cool, but I really wanted to make a video with Weird Al, and he agreed to do it. And that was the song that worked. And yeah, I mean, you know, Weird Al and I was doing Grand Royal magazine at the time. And if you guys who remember Grand Royal magazine, it was everything was Grand Royal, you know.
It's hard to overstate how culturally important it was in the 90s if you weren't there, because I feel like there hasn't been a lot of a lot of re-upping of that, but it was huge. It was a huge thing.
Yeah. It was kind of like we people of our kind finally owned the shit, you know. Like we kind of finally ran the shit, you know, because the Beastie Boys would never be more than their humble selves. And, you know, so it was kind of like they were running the shit, and it was cool because they were us. We were all them. And, you know, it was a very cool thing. And culturally, it just was across the board, the stores and the magazine and the culture of it, and the coolness of, like, you know, knowing every great soul jazz record and understanding the brilliance of Stax and, you know, all that stuff. I mean, and basically they were first and foremost a punk rock band, you know? So it was very cool. Anyway, so I was doing Grand Royal magazine, and I was also on tour with Yoko Ono at the time. Because through Butter 08, I met what's that?
I said no big deal, NBD.
Well, yeah, I mean,
who? Oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
I met Sean Lennon through Butter 08 because Yuka was friends with him, and then we became really good friends. And Sean became almost like a younger brother to me. He was going through his own hardships. He's a young kid at the time. He was young, like 16, 17, 18 or something.
Yeah.
And remember, it was like 92, 93, 94. Maybe he was going on 19. But anyway, and Yoko had this like rising record happening, which was like a kind of a rebirth for her, you know, not that she really needed it, but in terms of records, it was kind of like
it's an important record for her. It was something to show that she still was in it, you know, and doing it. Yeah.
Capitol Records wanted to do a tour around it. I knew Sean. We jammed with Yoko Ono. I was like, oh my God, I'm jamming with Yoko Ono. All I wanted to do was play Why and Why Not with her.
Right. Exactly.
I asked her, and she did. And we once did it at a show. He was like, Sean was like, she's not going to want to do it, but you know, she did it.
That's awesome. That kicks ass.
I mean, that first Yoko Ono record, the mirror back cover or the reverse mirror back cover of the first Yoko Ono record has always been one of my favorite records. So, you know, I'm hanging out with Yoko, and we're staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and Spike Jones and Mike and I came up with this idea of pranking Weird Al because he pranks everybody else. And
right.
this came about because Weird Al asked Yoko to do Free as a Bird. And I think she turned, like it was going to be like Something as a Turd or something. Remember that Beatles song that came out?
Oh, I remember. Yeah, again, to be explicitly clear, I worked at a record store when that Beatles.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I think I'm seeing your face is freezing every now and then. So I didn't see an expression when I said Free as a Bird, but of course you know that.
I remember it very well. It was very culturally ubiquitous at the time. It's like, oh my God, there's a new Beatles song. Was
right. And it was all part of that anthology, and it was a whole marketing thing. And it was a cool song, good enough, for the Beatles. I love the Beatles.
Yeah.
White Album's probably the best record of all time in a lot of ways. And I proudly say that because Rick Rubin, I heard, said that about it too. So I'm saying it proudly now. I always say that the White Album is the first really damaged record. Like it's the first record where people were like, what the fuck is this? A double untitled album by the most famous band in the world. And it's not like we wrote on it,
And there's things like, first of all, there's one of the hardest songs that Paul McCartney ever wrote in his entire career on it, which is amazing. And then there's also like Octopus's Garden and stuff. And it's like, all right, sure, why not?
Yeah, every Beatles album had that problem. Maxwell's
exactly.
No, Octopus's Garden is on Abbey Road.
You're right. No, you're right. What I'm thinking of was it Rocket Raccoon?
Yeah, there are some of those. There are enough of those on the White Album where it's like, oh yeah, another Beatles album with these songs, but it's still got Helter Skelter, which a lot of people argue is the first great metal song. I mean, aside from Summertime Blues and Blue Cheer, but that record was like a kind of a what the fuck is this record when it came out? It still is, man. It's the Beatles' most dangerous record still, I think, to this day. What's that?
Yeah, I mean, even with like, even with like Bungalow Bill and stuff, and Rocky Raccoon, it still is an amazing record.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Everybody's got something to hide, except for me and my monkey, and Your Blues, and a lot, had Music Concrete on it, number nine, pretty radical record.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
so you're playing you're playing a prank on Weird Al. That's the story, right? You're playing a prank on Weird Al.
You know how we do. We talk like this a lot when we talk together. But anyway, So the idea was, because Weird Al, I remember hanging out with Weird Al and hearing how upset he was about this, that Yoko Ono said no. The idea was, okay, I'm staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel with Yoko. We're going to interview Al for Grand Royal Magazine. Nice. Spike, to make it credible, Spike is going to do the interview, mic us for the interview. He's going to be the engineer of the interview because, he's a filmmaker. And it made it credible. So we're down at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and we tell Yoko, I'm going to bring up that story in this interview that I'm doing with Weird Al for Grand Royal. I'm going to bring up the Yoko Ono story, Free as a Bird. And as I bring it up, and Al's talking about it, we're going to single Yoko, and she's going to walk by. He had no idea she was there.
That's great. That's amazing.
And it worked. Al will tell you this Tuesday, he choked on his food. It was a scary moment. We're sitting there. I say, so what happened with Free as a Bird? Yeah, it's kind of sad. I mean, I understand. He was like, but Yoko didn't want. All of a sudden, she walks by, he sees her, and he freaks.
Amazing.
Anyway,
fantastic. That's
story.
And people say she doesn't have a sense of humor, Yeah,
he loved the fact that we did that.
That's God tier.
I mean, he was kind of dealing with the fact that, wait a minute, I just saw Yoko Ono. I've also been pranked on. It was a lot for him to take in, but he's a master, man. He was anyway. So that video, he decided to come up with this cool idea for the video. You can all see it. It's brilliantly done. Came in with a super professional crew. It was done in a soundstage in Hollywood, as you would expect. Weird Al had it scripted out, scene by scene. He had little bits of humor in it. He did a cameo in it where Judah pushed him out of the way. He had me with 3 arms eating a bagel. It's all brilliant, funny stuff.
Great video.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we had a lot of fun making it. That's the story of that.
So Russ, can you please, and I've talked about it on this show before, please tell me about Just Fred, because I think that is one of my favorite unsung records of the 90s. And I love it. I love it too much. And like for folks that maybe don't know, this is Fred Schneider of the B-52s, and Steve Albini recorded the thing.
Yeah.
And there's a hell of a band.
Yeah.
That was backing it up. And can you tell me how did this craziness come to pass?
Fred was wanting to make a solo record, and I think his partner at the time, they're no longer together, but they're still friends. Said you should have Steve Albini produce it. So he called up Steve, and Steve, of course, said, "Sure, I'll do it." He was like, "Well, can you get me a band?" And Steve and I had recorded together, and I was known in Steve's world, and Steve said, "I'll get you the great drummer. I'll get you Rick Sims on guitar and Tom Zalisky on bass." And I didn't know those guys, but sweetest guys in the world, very talented dudes. That became his band, and that's how I met Fred. Again, we, like gangbusters, became very, very, very close through making that record. Both, living in New York, and brilliant sense of humor. I asked Fred recently, because I was doing some radio show and I wanted to tell a story about Fred Schneider. I asked Fred recently, I texted him, what were some of the highlights of making that record? And he wrote me back, something that I agree was one of the highlights. We were trying to come up with a name for the band that he had, and we're all sitting there in the studio. Steve's mixing, and we've recorded a bunch of stuff, and Fred's makes a list of different bands, and he says, "I thought the list of the bands was the funniest part, because the names that he came up with were like 9 Inch Hole, and Terror at 3.5 Feet, Deadly Cupcake," which is what he settled on.
Which is good. Yeah. Deadly Cupcake is great. Yeah.
He would at the list. I mean, he said he wished he had the list, because from what I remember, 9 Inch Hole was a pretty funny one. But they were all kind of that level of humor. And Fred, Fred would say it, and we'd laugh, and he'd go, his big, room-consuming laugh that he has. Just all around another very humble guy, often just kind of like, will be confused about something and doesn't care, and just because he's like got his head in a million places, and very super talented, very funny. I can't stress that enough. And that's how that record happened. Then he got a bunch of other guys. He wanted me to tour with him, and I couldn't do it because I was too busy with pulling pranks on
Weird Al. Yeah.
And
I'm way too busy pranking Weird Al to go on tour.
Yeah, takes a priority. Fred understood. But he got like Six Finger Satellite, Guys from Shadowy Man, and to also record. And I think Zalisky and Sims ended up doing some shows. I did maybe one show in New York, but I couldn't like tour with the band, and they toured around. And that record was kind of like, I have a couple copies of it. It's kind of like, to me, it was just one of those records that just kind of happened and then moved on. I remained friends with Fred. We never really talked about it again. He's gone on to do other things, including the B-52s, as well as some other solo records. And then I met you, and I met a bunch of other people who were like talking about that record all of a sudden. And
Can I tell you? Can I tell you? And I'm going to say it on air that Tony Ash and I both realized that independent of each other, we both love that record. When I just threw it on one time in the van, he's like, "Wait, you like this record?" I'm like, "I fucking love this record." He's like, "I love this record too." I'm like, "Hell yeah!"
Okay,
and
so
this is how deep it went. We actually got to a serious discussion about covering Bulldozer. It never got beyond that, but it was a serious enough discussion. I was like, yeah, I can play the solo. Yeah, no big deal. Yeah, so I got to do an octave. It's
that was the first single.
I know, and it's a great one, and there's a video for it. And I think I mentioned when Rick Sims was on like years ago, and then like at some point I was supposed to have Fred Schneider on, and it never manifested, and I would still love to have him. But I love that record.
Yeah, he talked to that guy, that punked, becomes a punk podcast. He talked to that dude.
Yeah, never heard of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Who?
Yeah.
He plays in a popular band. I play in my band.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you probably, yeah.
good for them is what I say, and maybe I'll listen to it. Maybe I won't. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I can't. Podcast rivalry.
Okay, but I needed to talk about that on air with you because again, I think that is one of the craziest, weirdest, coolest records of the '90s that I felt like only Tony Ash and I listened to, but we listened to it obsessively.
Listening to it, you didn't know. I mean, I know we were about to. For anyone who doesn't know, Conan and my other band, Service, has toured together, and you mentioned that record to me when we met. You didn't know that you had no idea that at the time that you were. How long have you liked that record?
Oh, the day it came out. Like again, I still worked at the record store when that came out. So like, and I knew that you played on it, but here's the thing: I forgot.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah, because as much as I listened to it, I was like, and I remembered. Well, I remembered at one point that. Well, I remember Rick played the guitar because I learned the solo because I thought we were going to do it, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's Rick, right? Oh yeah, I know it. And then like we listened to that record somewhere in like Tennessee, I can't remember, and we're like, oh yeah, we gotta talk to Russ about that before this tour's over because like we've talked about that record. I think again a lot. Let's put it that way, a lot. And I think it's such a cool moment in time that's like quintessentially 90s, but also like surreal enough to be kind of its own thing in its own universe.
Yeah. And Fred, no matter what Fred does, it's always going to have something. He's got his thing going on, man. That's
I love Fred Schneider.
It's compelling. I mean, he's an original, all around. I mean, speaking of like talk, all these like, all these talk rock bands. I mean, he's like the original talk rock guy, and he's not the original. One of the guys who did that.
I mean, Jonathan Richman.
Yeah, I know. That's why I say, I mean, but he'll be someone who, I mean, waitresses, there's bands everywhere where there's people who do that kind of talk rock thing, but he'll honestly never credit himself with being a singer. Yeah, he'll say, I just talk.
Yeah.
I just talk, it's its own thing,
But it's so great. It's a friend of mine actually drum teched for B-52s on the tour, that last tour they just did, and I was like, oh god, I would love to see that. God damn it, and I wasn't able to, but
yeah. I think we still have some shows left. I know. I'm not sure if they have any shows left, but I know a friend of mine was wanting to go and asked me about it, but I don't remember.
Russ, tell me about Acme. That's an underrated record in the Blues Explosion pantheon. I don't know if it came a little bit too late or a little bit too early, but yeah, solid record, man.
Sounds like what you could say about all our records. Acme was, we wanted to, again, we recorded with Steve, and we wanted to do, based on kind of what happened with experimental remixes, I think we wanted to kind of do I mean, I've always been a big fan of hip hop. John has always been a big fan of hip hop. Judah less. We were listening to Ice Cube a lot at the time, and we listen to everything. We listen to Chemical Brothers. We're listening to, a lot of stuff like that. But also all the other stuff we were listening to. Anyway, we love the idea of like doing kind of stuff that was. And most importantly, I don't want anyone. We were listening to Dr. Octagon.
Of course, yes.
We were obsessed with Dr. Octagon. We were turned on to Dr. Octagon by a band named Durag.
Oh God, Bob Logg's band before Bob Logg.
Exactly. And those guys became our favorite opening band. Again, people who we became very, very. It's not like a broken record, but if you're great and you're cool, we're gonna be friends. I mean, it just happens. We all need each other, and we all this is all we do. And if we're doing it hard from the heart, hardcore, we're all gonna really like each other. So Durag is one of those bands. They were fucking badass motherfuckers. Okay, and I mean, I renamed Thermos Malling. You need to rename Thermos Malling. Brad is his real name. I renamed him Chocolate Joe. And Bob Logg, we met them and we hung out with them in Europe. They traveled in our van together. They were on tour. They played us Dr. Octagon. We just fell madly in love with it. Blue Flowers and all that. And
there was nothing like that at the time, too. I mean,
there's nothing like it. There's no way to explain. It was revolutionary. It was like underground punk rock hip hop. Not like there is now. There was nothing. I mean, there was Joe the Damager and stuff like that, but not stuff with I mean, nothing. There's nothing ever like Cool Keith. I mean, he's a space alien, so.
Right, exactly. It's baked in.
And the Automator and Cool Keith makes for, only what Dr. Octagon is, which is the most unusual, unique.
It's his own
rap record ever.
So you go in with Dan the Automator, and there's the Dr. John song that you do for the Scream soundtrack, right? Scream 2. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, we met Dan, we hit him up. We met him. He wanted to do the record. We worked with him. We did that. Yeah. I guess the Scream song is was the first thing we did together. That's right. And then we just, decided to do a whole record together. So.
And was that the first real kind of, for lack of a better term, producer really that you worked with? Because again, most of the folks you worked with were very good at capturing bands and adding aesthetic things like that. But I mean, Dan the Automator is coming from a different world. I mean, that's not the rock world, Yeah,
that was the first time we thought of getting someone outside of either John producing or the band producing or and Albini, that was the first album that we recorded from beginning to end with Albini. And if you've worked with Albini, he doesn't do tricks. It's just you record. He doesn't even like to say, I mean, they're Albini tricks, but not he doesn't want to even use compression, he doesn't want, we wanted to do fun, crazy, weird stuff with the songs, and Steve didn't want to be a part of it. We didn't want him to be a part of it, but he recorded it, and then we went and mixed it elsewhere with Dan.
Can I say though, and I know I'm not telling you anything you don't already know this for the audience, the man can record some drums. Let's be real. The man can seriously record some drums.
The man's one of the true great recording artists of drums ever.
Which, not the worst legacy, right? I mean,
no. I mean, aside from all the other great things that he is, I mean, we went there for the purpose of, we went there to record drums, to do basic tracks, because we knew that he's the greatest recording engineer on earth. And So what we knew that we wanted to make a kind of an more experimental record that wouldn't involve him. It wasn't like, Steve, we want to make, he was like, okay, we'll come and record. But, he knew what we were going to do with these tracks. We were just there, funnily, after Plan Page were there. We heard a lot of great Plan Page stories.
Some young up-and-comers, maybe you've heard of them. Yeah.
What's that?
I said some young up-and-comers, Plant and Page. They're doing good work. I think they're going somewhere. Yeah, they
actually asked us to go on tour with them, and we had to decline because we were asked to go on tour with the Beastie Boys.
Oh my God, that's like Sophie's Choice. Jesus Christ, dude.
So, interestingly enough, when I met Plant and Page at a famous bar in New York called the Spy Bar, and Sweeney was with me and introduced me to them. And was like, I think they might be upset about the fact that you didn't go on tour with them. I didn't know if he was joking or not, but we sat down with them. Everything was fine.
It seems like they probably have it's probably going to be all right for those dudes. Yeah, but can you imagine?
It's just kind of a joke.
But also, it's support for the Beastie Boys.
I don't know that anyone has ever said no to them. It's not like we said no. We had other things. I mean, at that point in time, we were going to go on tour with the Beastie Boys, not Page and Plant. So,
I mean, and that's no consolation prize. That's pretty good too. Oh yeah, Beastie Boys at their prime. Yeah, pretty good. Not bad.
96.
And that's like that's when they did the Tibetan peace concerts and all that. We
did all that Tibetan freedom concert. We did all that. We did both San Francisco and New York. That was amazing.
If you're into cool things, it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, again, Tibetan Freedom Concerts is another example of them owning the shit, to understand what that was like, it's like the coolest band on earth is running shit, and that was, that's what it felt like, what I'm talking about.
I do, yes, and yeah, it was the coolness was palpable for sure. So tell me more about Acme as a record, right? So you have like what? Do you want to get heavy, magical colors? Talk about the blues. There's a lot of great songs on here. This is, and again, it doesn't start with screaming, so Gerard wouldn't have been pissed off about it.
Yeah, a lot of those songs, the ones you named, were done with there were loops, and there was the use of alternate snare drum sounds and. Back in those days, you had to tap out. That's when I learned about the MPC, because it was Dan's pride and joy. And I would have to duplicate a snare sound back in those days to add a snare sound to better the sound. You sample a snare, and then I'd have to tap it out, because you couldn't nudge things back then like you can now. Otherwise, everything would flam. And I was down to do it, and I saw Dan's library of sounds. I worked with Dan. I loved working with Dan so much that I made a record with him. And again, Dan is, incredible. He's got incredible ideas. He's musically so brilliant with what he comes up with. One of the great, you want to get heavy was his idea of doing acoustic first and starting it off slow and then doing this crazy heavy drum part. That was him. We suggested this and that, but he wanted that idea of an acoustic track, of acoustic starting off that song. And I think that song is super powerful because of it. And the way those drums sound when they come in, that's Dan the Automator, man.
Oh, yeah.
And the best story of that mixing is Talk About the Blues, where we had this track. If you listen to Talk About the Blues now, it was just, we recorded we recorded everything like we do live. And Dan sat with it for a few hours. We kind of all left the studio. I hung out because I sort of was the most friendly with Dan. And I kind of watched him in action. He just took a bunch of different loops and samples and combined to make that track along with our live track. And It's brilliant. I mean, when we came back and when John and Judah came back, they were like, wow, this is something else. I mean, they didn't expect. We had, we weren't always in the same mindset as Dan, but he was coming through with some great ideas for songs. And the more he came through with these great ideas, the more it was, everyone just kind of like, everyone was like, happily working together and seeing that he was really making something special.
Absolutely. No, and it comes through. And it comes through as production, but in a way that doesn't sacrifice what made the Blues Explosion a good band.
Yeah, that was the idea. Like, we're not gonna. I mean, it's like everyone's always saying, like, why do you use drum machines? Like, I remember Beck once said, like, if it sounds good, I'm going to use it. The Dust Brothers didn't shy away from it when they made Odelay. It's like, if it sounds good, it's good. I mean, you always hear the Blues Explosion on every Blues Explosion record, no matter how many snare sounds are added, no matter how many samples are added, no matter how much stuff is moved around. We would never have let it compromise the integrity of the way the band sounds. We love samples and loops. We love when it's used correctly and well. I did it on Butter 08. I did it on Public Places. I did it on Men Without Pants. I've done it with Service. It's like we did it with Blues Explosion. If you use that stuff and it sounds good, and especially if in a rock and roll world, it's not very often done. I mean, the Flaming Lips do it. Yep. A lot of great bands do it. Radiohead does it all the time. I mean, it's a thing that people do, and when it sounds great, it's great.
Yeah, if it's great, it's great. So I love Acme. We could continue to talk about Acme for forever, but I do want to talk about Plastic Fang too. Can you tell me a little about Plastic Fang?
Yeah. Well, Plastic Fang was when we really decided to get a producer old school.
Yeah.
And we shopped around. We talked to a bunch of different people, and we ended up with Steve Jordan, who I like very much. I mean, that was like in the studio, different snare drums for different songs, different amps for different songs, like that kind of old school way of recording. Every song is its own very particular project. I'm not saying that isn't some it's not the way you do punk rock records, but kind of isn't. You kind of like, you have your amps, you have your guitar, you have your crazy pedals or your crazy amps or your crazy guitar playing, and you go. King Coffee and was not using different, as wild and crazy as those records are, the Ball Service records, those are all done with one drum kit, same snare drum, probably. But, we were using different snares. Steve was very versed in this stuff. He worked with the Stones. He worked with, Keith Richards, and he did stuff in an old school way, and it was cool. We liked it. And we had Don Smith, who was like the engineer for all those Keith Richards records and for Tom Petty, and he's kind of famously known engineer. And that's how we made that record. It's probably why it's the straightest sounding Blues Explosion record.
It is. There's very little like kind of craziness in that one as far as like production or adornment. But
it's the most old school, straightforward produced record. It sounds good. I think it's the one that falls the flattest for my taste. But it's got some great songs, and it was a great experience. And I would never take back the time that I got to work with someone like Steve Jordan as a drummer. He's highly respected by me. I mean, he was getting his chops hanging out with Stevie Wonder, like when he was a kid,
pretty good time. Yeah.
Steve Jordan is a very, 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 very unique dude and a very, very rare drum talent.
You got some great guest appearances on there too. There's some Bernie Worrell's on there, if I remember right?
Dr. John was, Bernie, those guys, the Funkadelic guys. Dr. John was also on that one. Yeah, who else is on that? I'm trying to remember.
Isn't Elliott Smith on there, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, that's when we met Elliott. Yeah, that's when we met Elliott, because we did a bunch of that record in New York, and we did a bunch of that record in LA. And when we were doing that record in LA, that was when we were doing some shows in LA. We befriended Elliott Smith. And that was a good, unfortunately, too short of a friendship. Elliott used to, hard for you to imagine, but Elliott used to dance on the side of the stage at our shows.
That's awesome.
Actually dance.
I mean, he was a rocker, heat miser. He liked the rock.
But you don't, even with heat miser, you don't think of Elliott being a happy dude, and he would proudly come up to us every time at the end of the shows and say, like, you guys just make me want to dance. You guys just make me want to dance. So we ended up hanging out with him. We ended up recording with him. We ended up playing shows with him. All kinds of stuff. So he can use two sides of his brain at the same time. He had a great studio with a couple of Fairchilds, and one of the probably the most coveted gear out there. He had two of them, and he would set up the mics and engineer the session and play bass on the session with us.
Can I also say that I think it was that too, if I remember right, that you brought two little known bands out on tour with you, the Liars and Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And that's
true. Yeah.
And I was like, holy crap. and I knew the Liars, and I knew Brian of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, but I didn't know I knew Seconds. I knew his other band. And I was like, wow. Because it was for me, it was an example of a band that's at top of their game as a live band, doing amazing work, bringing two other bands that are at the top of their game as live bands, and just being like, here's a great show for you. And I was like, wow, that's impressive. And it blew me away.
That's the way we worked. We like to bring bands. If we saw bands that we'd like as much as we could to like take them on the road with us and have a constant band that we like opening up for us. We saw the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And I remember John showing me a video of Karen. I was like, no brainer. Yes, we always made sure that we either saw them live. I do this as well. I need to, if a band that I want to tour with, not that we have as much of a choice with my band right now as like Blues Explosion did, but at that time it was like, if we see them and we like them, we'll ask them to go on tour. So I don't think we actually saw them live, but we had video footage of them. And I remember watching that video footage and just be like, fuck yeah, we're going on tour with them. And with them came the Liars too. They toured in a school bus.
I remember that. Yeah.
And they had like one of those rotating signs at the top of the front of the bus. Sometimes it would just say Liars. Sometimes it would say Yes. Sometimes they would jokingly write Russell Simins on it. It was funny stuff. I remember going in the back of their bus, and they had it kind of like, all set up and pimped out. They had like some TV and video games that they were playing, and they'd be in the back playing video games. Kind of a little lounge area that they had in the back of their school bus. And Angus, who's a very much a character singer for the Liars, funny guy, came to the back of the bus. I was hanging out watching them like play video games, and the Smiths were blasting. They were blasting the Smiths. I like the Smiths. I don't know that I'll be blasting them, but those bands definitely of that period, the Smiths were like the band for early aughts, bands. Smiths are great. For real. I have a lot of their records. but they're blasting the Smiths, and Angus walks in the back and says, he has his Australian accent. The only difference between us right now and YouTube and U2 is that they would definitely not be listening to the Smiths.
Fantastic.
They might be sitting there playing video games and feeling all pimped out in the back lounge.
Yeah.
U2's definitely not listening to the Smiths.
Certainly not. Yeah.
That was funny. They were great bands to play with. I mean, seeing the AIS every night, seeing the Liars every night, them like opening up for us, they were like worshiping us, we were worshiping them. We took them to Australia with us. That was great. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty good time. Like I said, it impressed me that like a package bill that was like that, just stacked of like, Jesus Christ.
That is
like,
one of the, that probably is one of the most probably the best package touring situation we had, except of course when we are Hex on tour with us.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, look, yes. Yeah, that's I mean, they were the best.
We are actually another band we worshiped. I mean, I love that. I loved being shows with this band. I wish we could have done more.
Yeah, and it's that band was just kind of getting to this next level of creativity and badassery when it all went kaboom, of course. But like, yeah, what a band! Wow, I mean, that was and I again, I know Jill from way back, and I was like, oh, let's check out Jill's new band. Like, Jesus H Christ! Like, oh my God!
The first time I saw them, I had the same feeling like when I saw. They're not that they're comparable in any way. I mean, there are bands that I see, and when I saw her performing on stage, I was completely blown away. And she was a unique, and it still is a unique force. We did one show with them. We can talk about that. We can move to that, but you can keep going in progression.
Yeah, I mean, like just as an aside, I still say she's one of the great front people of our time, and I stand by that.
For my money, the best for me, she's the best front person out there.
Yeah, it's 100%. Yeah, all right. So let's and we unfortunately do need to wrap it up, and I want to talk a little bit about Drag Me as well too. So just real quick, can you tell me about Damage and tell me where you're at as a band when that came out?
Talk about what?
Oh, talk to me about Damage. And where you guys were as a band.
Damage was like, after Plastic Fang, we wanted to get a little crazier again. That was also Steve Jordan. I had a studio in New York that I kind of built myself. It was a space that I rented out from someone who had a bit like a kind of a makeshift studio. I got, I had a console, I had 24-track studio tape machines. So we were able to kind of like work and write in my studio in New York. Steve Jordan would come, and we decided to work with him again, at least in a writing, help us with writing some stuff or suggestions on some of the songs we were doing. And that's how that song came. The song Damage was, I think I said, or John asked me if I wanted to, because of my sort of production credits and I had more savvy now in the studio. He asked if I wanted to do one of the songs, and I said, yeah, I'll produce Damage, the first song, which has its own thing. And I did it, and I really was happy with how it turned out. I did it with a crew called the Elegant Two, and I think that song stands out. There's a lot of great songs on that record, but it's got its own
feel. Yeah.
A Russell Simmons feel to it, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, Tom Waits heard that song, and I think it was one of the songs that made him want me to play drums on when he came out to do Letterman.
Yeah, no big deal. By the
Yeah,
way,
when
have I
when
ever said that Tom Waits is one of my favorite artists of all time? Because Tom Waits is one of my favorite artists of all
Yeah,
time.
I mean, I used to dress like Tom Waits when I was younger. I mean, I wasted and wounded. It ain't what the moon did. You know, I mean, Tom Waits was definitely a hero of mine for years. Seeing him and knowing that I was playing with him was
Pretty great.
thrill and nerve wracking. And when he came in and asked me if that was the drum that I played on that song "Damage," and I said, "Yeah, it was."
And
'Cause
that's a great tune too. Make It Rain too. Real Gone. That's a great record. That's like one of his great records. I mean, he
It
did
is.
so many great records.
It is.
That's one that I think that like I don't know. A lot of people slept on it or something. Where it's like, no, if you know, do you know this is as good as or better in some ways than like Rain Dogs or than anyway.
Yeah.
This isn't a Tom Waits podcast, but you get me. Yeah.
I think after Mule Variations, that brought him a whole other crowd of people, and it was kind of his like arriving again record. And I think every record after that, it was just kind of loved, but they all kind of loved it. A kind of, you know, it didn't get like they all. I mean, he always had a very, very successful level of you know, selling records and fandom. And after Mule Variations, that record is great. It didn't get talked about as much as you're right. It should have, because it is a great record. And anyone who ever wonders what Kathleen Brennan, I mean, she mixed that she mixed that Letterman show.
Oh, really?
That mix is
Sounds
amazing.
great.
The drums sound amazing. Yeah,
Yes,
I remember
they do.
talking to her about that. She's pretty amazing too. She's a really great songwriter. And
Well, and the percussion and the drums are so key to what Tom Waits does too. It's that, you know, kind of bumping and clanking.
She was on it. I knew that she worked with him and wrote with him, and they did amazing record. They made amazing records together. But she also she mixed that live performance. She was up there mixing it with the guys in the control room. She made it sound amazing. Anyway,
yeah, it was a great little moment in time, and definitely a holy crap, really? Wow, that's awesome kind of moment.
Yeah, Larry Taylor was on that. Larry Taylor, the bass player from Can. A lot of great stories from him. That was a lot of fun. And you know, it was Mark Rebo was supposed to be there, but we've been talking to Tom Waits about doing something together. So he called Judah and then asked if I would play drums. That's how that happened. Anyway, that's another aside. But
yeah, I mean, well, it's a pretty good one. And then so around that same time, there's the No Reservations song, the Anthony Bourdain that theme song. Which, did you have any idea at the time? I mean, obviously the book had, you knew Anthony Bourdain was, I'm sure, at the time. I mean, he was known dude.
Yeah. We knew him. We met him. He wanted us to do the song. I knew that he was cool, but when I met him, I only realized then that he's like really punk rock cool. Like he is the real deal. Like there's a reason why that book is the way that book is. He is the real deal, real punk rock fan. Loved the Blues Explosion. Loved what we wrote for him. Would stay in touch with me. Like if we were going on tour in New Orleans or something, he'd make sure like he got us into restaurants, and just a great guy. That was pretty special. And that was one of our staples live for a while. We really loved playing that song live. So yeah, that was a good experience. I mean, he just took us out to his Leal restaurant, and we sat there and he talked to us, and it was like, you are the real deal, dude.
Yeah. He seems like the realest fucking guy. I mean, I never had the pleasure, but
before all of this stuff happened, this is, before he became like a super, super mega star.
International superstar. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, quite the hit for the world that dude's not in it anymore, which is a shame.
Yeah.
So, okay. So then there's kind of a Blues Explosion hiatus for a few years, right? And then there's the All Tomorrow's Party stuff, right? It was the Neutral Milk Hotel, Neutral Milk Hotel, the one in 2012, right? That you guys play that.
Yeah. We played All Tomorrow's Parties. I think we curated one of those.
Oh, that's right. That was a few years later. I don't remember the exact year.
Yeah.
And Judah got that. There's that. He was. He got a little sick for a while after that, if I remember correctly. Right. When did I see 20 Miles? I saw 20 Miles around that time, and I can't remember when. It doesn't matter. Anyway, nobody cares.
20 Miles is earlier. We took a break, and we got back together and did Meat and Bone, and which was kind of a little bit of a comeback for us. And then we did, No Wave Dance Party.
That's right, No Wave Dance Party. That's a great name, by the way.
Yeah, that happened because I think we're going to call it New Wave, and Jude didn't like the word New Wave, so we called it No Wave instead. Something like that. And then we went on tour, as we always did, massive amounts of touring, and Judah got sick.
He got sick.
We took a break, and then that was the time when we were doing shows with We Are Hex. And we did a bunch of touring with them. And
what was the one song? Never Write a Love Song, and I Won't Start Soon.
She retracts that now because she writes love songs.
I haven't busted her chops about that, but I was like, oh, yeah, never say never, kid.
To her credit. That's funny. But yeah, so we went on. She and I were involved and talking at that time. So I decided to come back off of tour. It was unexpected, and I came here to Indianapolis because of that unexpected hiatus. So I ended up here, and we ended up working together, and we fell in love. I mean, we'd fallen in love before, but we ended up working together and making music and making a record. And I stayed here, and I never went back. Blues Explosion just kind of never was doing anything over those years, still isn't. And, we check on with Judah from time to time. He's doing much better, but it is what it is. And like what I always do when I'm not doing that, I'm doing something else. And that's how Service was born.
Yeah, and John's doing Hitmakers, and that's cool. That's super rad band. But yeah, I mean, not to put a fine point on it, and especially with anyone that joins later live or whatever. But I mean, you guys put out an amazing record. Like it took you a while, but you put out an amazing record. Like,
well, thank you.
I don't say that often. I don't say that very often.
I know you don't, and that's much appreciated, and it means a lot to us. And you not only say it, but you picked it, and that means a lot to us. I appreciate it. Yeah. So I know you know a lot of bands and a lot of music.
I sure do.
The fact that you picked that record means a lot to us. So, and right now we're focusing very, very heavily on the next record, which we started doing that like midway through touring the last record. So this one's not going to take us long to make.
Is this going to be a quicker turnover?
Yeah. Well, now we have we have our way of doing things that we know how we want to do it, how we like to do it. We were still finding our sea legs for that record, and now we kind of are more we kind of have our way of doing things, and we already have most of the stuff for the next record, at least in drips and drabs, some more than others, and that's where we're just focusing now on getting them, getting them written and recorded and playing them out some as much as we can, and then shooting for 2024 to have another record out.
Excellent news.
What's that?
I said that's excellent news. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and it's wild because I feel like folks that are fans of We Are Hex and folks that are fans of Blues Explosion will both love Service, but like maybe not in the way that you think you would. Like you guys are doing a unique thing, and you're doing a unique thing that there's just not a lot of bands that do that specific thing. The songs really work as a live act. Like it's unparalleled. Yeah, I'm an unabashed fan, and I can't wait till to see what you guys have cooking up next. And
Well, thanks, Conan. Thanks. That means a lot, Conan. Thank you.
You're at the peak of your power, and yeah, continue powering on for sure. I'm glad to hear.
Right on.
So Russell, you've been so good. It's been so good to talk to you, and it's been awesome having you on, spending so much time talking about all these this incredible career in music that you've had and continue to have. You've heard the show. I close out the show. It's the only canned question I ever ask, and then you can choose to interpret.
I don't even remember what it is, but I let me just say that I'm very thank you so much for having me. I love the show. I was very excited to hear that I was going to be on it. So it means a lot to me to be on it as well. You do a great job. You're great at what you do. And I hope for many more episodes. What are we at, 300 and something now?
323. I said 322 mistakenly because I was looking at the wrong thing. But
yeah, keep on keeping on, man. You know what you're doing.
So Russ, why do you do what you do?
Because I wouldn't want to live if I didn't.
That's real.
Because it's what makes me want to live.
Russell Simins, thanks so much, sir.
Thank you, Conan, so much.
So great to have you. Hope to see you soon.
Right on. Same.
Take care, brother.
Take care.
Oh, there he goes, Mr. Russell Simins. All right, that was a hell of a time, man. Let's play it out. Let's do we'll do a two for here. We'll do a Service song and we'll do a Blues Explosion song. And you will love all of it, good people, because that is what you do. Let's do Two Kinds of Love.